I said I just needed some space, but then I disappeared from his life for weeks. My name is Sage Monroe. I'm 27, and I once believed I was stepping into the happiest chapter of my life. Kai Ellison proposed to me one quiet late autumn afternoon. The kitchen smelled of warm apple pie sunlight spilled over the counter, and there he was down on one knee looking at me with eyes that used to make me feel unshakably safe. I said yes, without hesitation, without a second thought. I did love Kai, that much was true, but what I never said out loud was that the closer we got to the wedding, the more it felt like I was wearing a beautiful dress, 2 sizes too tight. I couldn't quite name the fear. It didn't come from him. It wasn't even about us, not really. It came from somewhere deeper, inside me. Each morning I woke up next to Kai, I smiled like everything was perfect. I picked out napkin colors for the reception. I texted florists, sent Pinterest links, discussed honeymoon villas in Tuscany. But at night, in the quiet hum of our bedroom lamp, I'd lie still, eyes tracing invisible lines on the ceiling, and ask myself, am I living the life I chose? Or the one I was handed I didn't tell anyone? Not my mom, not my sister, not even myself, not in full honesty. Until one day I told Kai, I think I need to go home to Merrow Hill for a bit. I miss my sister. I just need to clear my head. He didn't question it. He trusted me like he always had. He held me at the train station, pressed his lips against my hair, and whispered, "Go. Just remember, you don't have to be perfect. You only ever have to be you." I nodded, but something inside me had already started to crack. As the train pulled out of Ashridge, I leaned my head against the window, watching patches of golden trees blur past. And quietly, I hoped the distance would bring me clarity, that something, anything would make the noise in my head finally stop. Merrow Hill was still as I remembered, my childhood home tucked beneath rust-colored trees, the streets sleepy with routine. My sister welcomed me with soft smiles and warm coffee. Mornings were quiet, afternoons passed in books and long walks. She asked me once, "Are you okay?" I didn't know how to answer. Then one morning, as I was stepping out of the local pharmacy, I heard someone call my name. I turned, and there he was, Zane Velez. We didn't speak at first. He stood across the street holding a paper bag, and a look I knew too well. A look that used to undo me. I could have walked away. I didn't. And Zane didn't come closer. But I did. I crossed the street. If you've ever been there, caught between what's right and what's familiar, then maybe you'll understand what I'm about to share. If you've ever told someone, "I need time," but what you really needed was to run from yourself, then maybe this story is for you. Let me know below, have you ever been that person? And if you want to know what happened next, what I did after seeing my ex again, stick with me. There's more to this story than even I was prepared for. And if you don't want to miss any of it, hit subscribe. Because what happened after wasn't at all what I expected. I didn't go looking for him, but I didn't walk away when he appeared. The first time I saw Zane again, I told myself it was just coincidence. A small town, one grocery store, fewer than 4,000 people. It made sense, right, that I'd walk into Merrow Hill Market looking for almond milk and walk out with an unspoken question burning in my chest. He stood at the end of aisle 5, holding a can of soup. He didn't look up right away, but when he did, my throat tightened. It had been 3 years since we'd spoken. 3 years since I walked out of that downtown apartment sobbing with my keys shaking in my hand. 3 years since he broke my heart in a dozen little ways, and I told myself I was done. Zane looked almost the same. Same storm gray eyes. Same scar on his right temple from that time he fell off his bike as a kid. But his energy was quieter now. Less wild, less angry. Still familiar. Dangerously familiar. "Hey," he said like no time had passed. And me, I froze. Then nodded. "Hey," that was it. 2 syllables and a hurricane began building inside me. He asked if I wanted to grab coffee. I should have said no. I didn't. We sat at a corner booth in Cafe Hollow. The air smelled like roasted beans and cinnamon. I fiddled with the edge of a paper napkin while he asked about my job, my sister, and hesitantly, Kai. I answered the basics. "Yeah, I'm engaged. Summer wedding." He nodded but didn't smile. Just sipped his espresso and watched me too closely. Then he said, "You look tired." I wanted to snap back. Tell him I was just fine. That being tired didn't mean anything, but I didn't. because he wasn't wrong. The wedding had become this machine: emails, deposits, seating charts, smile for the camera. Make sure the invitations match the napkins. I felt like a cardboard cutout of myself. Zayn didn't talk about his love life, didn't say if he was seeing someone, just sat there, steady, like he was holding space for me to fall apart, and somehow I wanted to. That afternoon became the next morning, then another meetup, then 3. We didn't kiss, we didn't even touch, but that didn't mean it wasn't dangerous. Every time I looked into his eyes, I saw a version of myself I hadn't been in years, reckless, alive, curious. And for a moment I missed her. Missed being wanted with no pressure to be perfect. I kept telling myself I was just figuring things out, that maybe once I got this out of my system, I'd go back to Oshridge, tell Kai everything, and we'd be stronger for it. But that wasn't honesty. That was fear wearing a mask. The truth: I didn't know who I was anymore. A fiancé, a runaway, a coward. Kai texted me that night. "How's your sister? Hope you're getting rest. Miss you." I stared at the screen, typed "miss you too," then deleted it. I didn't reply. And I could say I was trying to be gentle, that I didn't want to lie or say things I couldn't explain yet. But that would be another excuse. The silence wasn't kindness, it was avoidance. It was the sound of me unraveling one skipped message at a time. Zayn never asked for more. He didn't push. Maybe that made it worse. Maybe that made it easier to keep showing up. I remember one afternoon sitting beside him in his car, watching the rain beat across the windshield. He said, "You always had this way of making everything feel like it mattered." I looked out at the gray sky and whispered, "I don't even know what matters anymore." He turned toward me but didn't speak. And in that silence, I felt more seen than I had in weeks. I turned off my notifications and started to wonder what it felt like not to be expected. I told myself I was just giving him space too. That silence could be mutual, that he'd understand. But silence grows. And soon it starts asking questions of its own. The morning after that second coffee with Zayn, I woke to 3 unread messages from Kai. One was a photo of the sunset in Oshridge. Another was a meme, one of those dumb ones he always knew would make me laugh. The third just said, "Morning, Sage. Hope you're sleeping okay. Let me know if you need anything." I read them all, didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know how to step back into a conversation without lying. And so I waited. I told myself I'd reply later, after a walk, after lunch, after figuring out what the hell I was doing. Later became evening, evening became tomorrow. And then, it became a pattern. I didn't block him, didn't delete our thread, but I turned off notifications, closed the window in my mind where his name used to light up. It's not like I was busy. Most days in Marrow Hill passed quietly. The same park benches, the same late afternoon breeze off the lake. But inside me, everything felt like shifting sand, like I couldn't tell which parts of me were true anymore. I'd walk the streets and imagine our wedding, the vows, the music, my mother crying into her clutch. Then I'd blink and see myself slipping out the back door before I ever left my mouth. I was scared, but not in the way brides get jitters. I was scared that marrying Kai meant locking a door I wasn't ready to close. Scared that maybe he deserved someone braver than me. Meanwhile, Zayn never asked what was going on. Not once did he mention the ring on my finger. Not once did he pressure or hint. He just kept showing up. Same table at Cafe Hollow. Same half laugh when I joked about hating wedding hashtags. One day he handed me a book, an old dog-eared copy of a poetry collection we used to read in college. I didn't take it at first. "Why are you giving this to me?" I asked. He shrugged. "You left it. I kept it. Figured maybe it still meant something." It did. That was the problem. In Kai's world, I was being celebrated. In Zayn's, I was being remembered. And somewhere in between, I forgot how to exist without being someone else's something. A week passed, then another. Kai called. Once, twice. I watched the screen light up, heart pounding, and didn't pick up. The guilt wasn't loud. It wasn't a scream. It was a hum. A constant aching background noise. I started avoiding the mirror, because every time I caught my reflection, I saw a woman I couldn't defend. I wasn't cheating. I wasn't lying. But I was erasing the life I had with Kai, one unread message at a time. People talk about ghosting like it's something cold, like it's apathy, like it's sharp and deliberate and cruel. But mine wasn't. It was slow. It was tired. It was me drowning in indecision and pulling the silence over my head like a weighted blanket. I couldn't explain what I was feeling to Kai, because explaining meant choosing. And I didn't want to choose. I wanted someone to choose for me, to make it easy, to either walk away first or drag me back into certainty. Neither happened, and so I vanished, not physically, emotionally, completely. I stayed at my sister's a few more days, claiming I needed time to recharge. She stopped asking questions. I think she could tell there were answers I wasn't ready to say aloud. Zane asked if I was going back soon. I said, "Not yet." He didn't press. He just nodded and passed me another coffee across the table. That night, lying on the guest bed, I opened our wedding planning app. Dozens of alerts, unconfirmed bookings, florist emails, dress fitting reminders, and a message from Kai. Just tell me if you're okay. That's all I want. I put the phone down, faced the ceiling, and felt something in me fold in on itself. I wanted to be okay. But the truth was, I didn't know what okay even looked like anymore. And with every day that passed, Kai's voice in my life grew quieter. Not because he was gone, but because I was fading. On purpose. And I think that was the part that scared me most. That I was starting to forget how it felt to be missed. And wondering if that was safer than being seen. I opened the door, and there he was. No warning, no time to lie. It was a Tuesday, cloudy. The kind of gray that soaks into your skin. I was in the kitchen barefoot, nursing lukewarm tea, and wondering if I'd made a mistake staying this long. Then I heard the knock. Not the light kind. Firm, steady. Like someone who knew exactly what they were doing there. I froze. My sister was at work. No one ever came by unannounced in Marrow Hill. I peeked through the front window and felt my chest clamp shut. Kai. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Jaw clenched. Eyes darting toward the trees, then back to the door. I backed away from the window like a child caught sneaking candy. I didn't have time to think. He knocked again. I opened the door, and the moment our eyes met, everything I'd tried to suppress came rushing back like a wave to the chest. He blinked once, just once, then said, "Hey, soft, careful, hey," I replied, my voice barely there. "I didn't think you'd come," I added, already regretting the words. He gave a dry half-laugh. "Yeah, you made that kind of obvious." Silence. Then I stepped aside, letting him in. He walked slowly, scanning the living room like it held answers to questions he couldn't ask. The smell of lemon cleaner lingered in the air. A coffee mug sat half-finished on the table. My book, Zane's book, was face down on the arm of the couch. I felt exposed, like I was being inspected. And maybe I deserved to be. Kai didn't sit. He just stood in the middle of the room like he didn't want to settle into anything he wasn't sure was real. "How was the drive?" I asked, fumbling for anything normal. He shrugged. "Didn't hit traffic. Want something to drink?" "No, I'm good." The awkwardness was suffocating. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't accusing. He was too quiet. And that somehow made it worse. Finally, he looked at me, really looked. "Sage," he said, "what's going on?" My mouth opened, but nothing came out, so I did what I'd been doing all month. I stalled. "I've just been overwhelmed," I said. "It's all been a lot." He nodded slowly. "I get that. I do." But disappearing on me for weeks. He was trying to stay calm. I could see it in the way he balled his fists and relaxed them again. I texted. I called. "You said you needed time, and I respected that. But I didn't think time meant silence." I looked at the floor, at my own bare toes pressing into the rug, anywhere but his eyes. I didn't know what to say. I whispered. "Try the truth," he said, voice firm. "Just once." I inhaled deeply, and I said it. I ran into Zane. The name hung in the air like smoke. Kai blinked. Once, then again. Expression unreadable. At the store, I added like it made a difference. It wasn't planned. He sat down slowly, elbows on his knees. "You saw him." "Okay." "Did you talk?" "Yes." "How many times?" The pause was too long. He exhaled, already knowing. You've been spending time with him. I nodded, shame warming my throat. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you. He looked up, eyes glassy but hard. You didn't want to hurt me, so you chose to vanish instead. You let me sit in silence while you played house with your ex. No, I said quickly, it wasn't like that. Then explain it to me, he snapped. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like I've been your backup plan. His voice cracked on that last word. And that nearly broke me. I didn't plan any of this, I said, tears welling up. I just seeing him again stirred things I thought were gone. I needed to know if they really were. Kai stood, walked toward the window, his back to me now. You know what the worst part is, he said, voice low. I would have forgiven anything if you'd just told me. If you'd said you were confused, scared, unsure, I would have listened. He turned around. But you shut me out. Like I didn't even deserve honesty. I didn't know what I felt, I cried. I was trying to figure it out before I dragged you through it. He walked to the table, eyes landing on the book. Picked it up, read the title. Didn't say a word, just set it back down. Then he turned to me. I need time to think, he said. And I flinched. Because it was my own line thrown back like a mirror I couldn't escape. Before I could say anything, he was already at the door. He looked back once, and in that look, I saw it. The man I almost married now halfway out the door, I left open too long. And I didn't stop him. I couldn't. I still wore the ring, but the way he looked at me said it didn't mean anything anymore. For 2 days after Kai left Marrow Hill, I walked around like a shadow in my own skin. I went through the motions, brushed my teeth, fed the dog, poured coffee I didn't drink. But something in me had snapped. Not in a dramatic, screaming sort of way. No, it was quiet. A severing. Like a string had been clipped somewhere deep in my chest. The silence in the house echoed harder after that. Even Zane could feel it. We ran into each other on the edge of town later that week. He offered a small smile. You okay? I nodded. Lied. Yeah. He looked unconvinced, but he didn't push. And honestly, that was the problem. No one pushed. Not him, not my sister, not even me. I wore the ring like a ghost of who I used to be. It didn't feel like mine anymore, but I wasn't ready to take it off either. I went back to Ashridge 2 days later. I needed to be in my own space again. To face the wedding board still tacked to the wall. To open the fridge we used to stock together. To stand in the home we were supposed to build a life in. And feel the weight of what I'd done. Kai wasn't there. Half his closet was empty. His toothbrush was gone. He'd taken what mattered, left what didn't. I sat on the couch for hours that night. No music, no TV, just the hum of the fridge and the ache in my hands where I kept twisting the ring. Then Saturday came, late afternoon. Sunlight cut through the blinds like golden blades, and then a knock. For a second I thought it was the neighbor. Then I thought maybe it was Nova or a delivery. But when I opened the door, Kai, again. He looked different. Not angry, not exhausted, resolved. He stepped in without saying much. His eyes skimmed the room, then found mine. We need to talk, he said. I nodded. I was thinking the same. We sat across from each other, the space between us louder than any screaming match could have been. He didn't waste time. I'm not here to argue, he began. I've done enough of that in my head already. I leaned forward. Kai? He held up a hand. Let me finish. I nodded. He inhaled deeply, then looked me straight in the eye. I loved you, he said. Not love. Loved. Past tense. The word burned. I wanted to spend my life with you. I believed in us. Even when things got hard. Even when you needed space, I thought, this is just a bump. I trusted you. I blinked back something sharp in my eyes. He continued. And then you disappeared. Not physically, emotionally. You stopped being reachable, stopped being you. My hands trembled. I clasped them together. I didn't mean for any of it to happen like that, but it did, he said. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice, and now I have to make one too. I held my breath, afraid of what came next. Afraid because deep down I already knew. Kai reached into his coat pocket, pulled out an envelope, set it gently on the table between us. I canceled everything. The venue, the vendors, the photographer. They were surprisingly understanding. I stared at the envelope like it might explode. Why are you telling me this? I asked quietly. Because I need closure, he said. And maybe you do too. I nodded slowly. I do. Then he pointed calmly to my left hand. The ring, he said. It doesn't belong there anymore. The words were gentle, not cruel, but final. I looked down. At the delicate band that once meant forever, my fingers felt cold. I slid it off, placed it next to the envelope. The sound of metal on wood was quieter than I expected, but it echoed all the same. Kai looked at it, then at me. Is this really it? I asked. Are you just done? He paused, and his answer came like a whisper meant to last. I'm not a pause button, Sage. You don't get to put me on hold while you figure out your feelings for someone else. That's not love. That's convenience. I felt my heart drop to the floor. His voice softened. I hope you find what you're looking for, but you won't find it in the rearview mirror. He stood, took one last look around, then back at me. No more anger, no hatred, just something that felt like mercy. He turned and walked to the door. I didn't follow, didn't stop him. The door clicked shut, and I sat there staring at the ring, at the envelope, at the space he used to fill with laughter and music and warmth. And all I could think was, I let him go. I thought I had time. But time was the first thing I ran out of. I came back to Ashridge, but he was the one who had vanished. It was strange coming home to a place that no longer recognized me. The keys still fit. The hallway still smelled like eucalyptus and coffee. But the silence inside wasn't the same. When I opened the door, the first thing I noticed was the missing jacket on the hook by the entrance. Then the guitar stand empty. The framed photo of us by the windowsill gone. Kai had packed light, took only what was his, left the walls intact but stripped of color. I placed my suitcase near the couch and stood there for a moment just listening. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the clock we never bothered to reset for daylight saving. It felt hollow, like walking into a memory someone else had already started forgetting. I didn't cry, not yet. I moved through the apartment in slow circles, touching surfaces like they might speak to me. My favorite blanket was still here. So was the wedding binder untouched on the shelf tabs still poking out like fragile reminders. I opened it. Inside was a printed timeline, our timeline. July 17th. Final RSVP count. August 3rd dress fitting. September 10th, say I do. I tore the page out, folded it, tucked it in the drawer of my nightstand. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in the bed we'd shared, facing the empty pillow beside me, and wondered when the part of me that still hoped would finally shut up. By morning, everything ached. My throat, my spine, whatever was left of my pride. I brewed coffee like I always did, 2 spoons of sugar oat milk ceramic mug with a chip in the rim. But it tasted off, like I didn't belong in this routine anymore. I scrolled through my phone, half out of habit, half out of desperation. No messages, no missed calls. Not from him, not from anyone. Until a name popped up that made my stomach tighten. Rhett Lang, Kai's best friend. One of the only people who'd never liked me much, but was too polite to say it. Text message. Hey, just checking in. Hope you're okay. I know things are complicated. You don't have to reply. I stared at the screen for minutes. Didn't respond. Not because I was angry, because I didn't know how to re-enter someone else's life after being erased from it. But that afternoon, I did something I shouldn't have. I checked Nova Blake's story. Nova, bright, loud, ever-present Nova. She used to be my friend. We met through Kai, bonded over late-night drinks and bad movie nights. In her story, I saw a table, 2 mugs, a blurry glimpse of Kai's sleeve across from her, then a boomerang Nova laughing, covering her mouth, tossing her head back. The camera didn't pan to him, but it didn't have to. I knew that laugh. I knew that booth. It was Velvet Ember, the place Kai and I once called ours. I set my phone down, hard. It's funny how something so small can split you wide open. Not the fact that he was with someone else, but who? Nova knew everything. She knew what I'd done. And still, maybe that was what stung most, that the version of me she chose to believe was the one I'd shown at my worst. And she stepped in like it didn't matter. Like Kai needed someone to sweep the pieces away before he had time to even name them. I got up, paced, sat back down. Didn't know if I wanted to scream or disappear again. Eventually, I called my sister. She didn't answer, left a voicemail instead. "Hey, I'm back. Just wanted to say I'm okay, or trying to be. That's all." But it wasn't all, not even close, because deep down something bitter and pathetic had started to form in my chest. I thought he moved on fast. I thought maybe I deserved this. I thought, why does she get his attention when I gave him my silence? And then just like that, the jealousy kicked in. Ugly, involuntary, hypocritical. I had no right, no claim, but still I wanted him to hurt. Just a little, just enough to match the slow burn I'd been living in. I almost messaged Nova. Almost. But what could I say? "Hey, thanks for replacing me so efficiently. Hope he orders the same coffee he did with me." I closed the app, tossed my phone across the room, watched it bounce on the couch cushion like none of this was as dramatic as it felt. Then I laughed, one of those sad, humorless things that sounds like a cough dressed up as a joke. I didn't know what I expected. That Kai would wait, that I could return, and somehow restart the story I'd walked away from. No. That chapter was gone. He'd closed it for both of us. Nova was just the page that came after. I stared out the window for a long time, at the moving cars, the people who had somewhere to be, and I sat completely still, because I was finally starting to realize something I left thinking I had time. But time has a funny way of choosing sides, and this time it chose him. I didn't recognize myself anymore, just a woman parked down the street watching a life that used to be hers. It started with one walk. That's what I told myself. Just a walk. Just some fresh air. I hadn't left the apartment in days. But my feet didn't wander. They knew exactly where they were going. Kai's new place was across town, an old duplex near the bookstore we used to love. I didn't even have to look up his address. I remembered the street name from the lease emails we used to skim together. The house had red shutters, a tiny porch with a hanging fern, a quiet kind of charm. I stood on the sidewalk across from it for 5 minutes, 10, 15. Told myself I'd leave if anyone saw me. No one did. Inside, I saw movement, a shadow, a laugh I thought I recognized. I went home, tried to forget, failed. The next day I walked past again. This time I told myself I was just headed to the bakery nearby. I didn't buy anything. The third time I parked. Just far enough down the street that I couldn't be accused of watching, but close enough to still count as exactly that. I sat in my car engine off, fingers wrapped tightly around the steering wheel. There were dishes in his window, music playing softly, some jazz record we'd once danced to at 2 a.m. And then the front door opened. Kai stepped out. He looked good, tired but composed, wearing the gray hoodie I used to steal from his closet. He didn't see me, didn't pause, just walked to his car phone in hand, smiling at whatever was on the screen. I didn't need to guess. My stomach twisted. A soft, sour ache. I started doing it more often after that. Twice a week, then 4. I knew it was wrong, knew it made me someone I never wanted to be. But watching him, it was the only way I still felt connected to anything real. I never messaged him, never knocked on his door. I wasn't trying to get him back. At least I don't think I was. I just wanted to know if I'd been replaced. If he smiled differently now. If the warmth I'd once been wrapped in could exist without me. And the truth was, it could. One afternoon I saw him walking with Nova. They didn't touch, but they didn't need to. The way he looked at her, calm, open, present, was enough. I drove off before they could see me. When I got home, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. The woman looking back at me had dark circles under her eyes, hair in a bun she hadn't brushed, a hoodie that didn't belong to her anymore. And worst of all, eyes that didn't blink when she whispered, "Who are you?" I wasn't Sage the fiancé. I wasn't Sage the ex. I wasn't even sure I was Sage the person. I was just someone orbiting the ruins of a life I'd left behind. Someone watching the ending play out from outside the frame. That night, I couldn't sleep. The walls of the apartment felt tighter than usual. Every object seemed to carry a ghost. The throw blanket we fought over during movie nights. The chipped mug Kai bought for me at a farmer's market. The corner of the couch where we'd planned baby names once, just joking. Mostly, I pulled the blanket tighter around myself and sat on the floor. No tears. I was past that. What lived in me now wasn't sadness. It was something else, heavier, like shame with sharp edges. The next morning I went back, parked, waited. No movement. I sat there anyway. And that's when I saw it. Through the window just for a moment. A photo. Our photo. Still framed. Still standing, sitting on the shelf beside his record player. I stared at it, heartbeat climbing my throat. Was it recent? Had he forgotten to take it down? Did he ever even look at it? I didn't know. Didn't want to. I left. Back in my apartment, I sat by the window wrapped in the old hoodie and realized something brutal. I had become the ghost. Not just in his life, in my own. I didn't create anymore. Didn't write. Didn't call friends. Didn't plan ahead. All I did was haunt. And even ghosts get tired. I hadn't spoken to Zane in weeks. I think he knew it was over before I did. That I was never really there with him, just hiding behind what he represented. I looked down at my phone, opened my photos, and deleted them. All of them. Zane, Kai, the ring, the dress. The memories I kept revisiting like they were doors I still had keys to. I deleted them all. Then I stood, walked to the mirror, and for the first time in weeks, I saw myself. Not the version I wanted to be. Not the version I lost. Just me. Tired. Unsteady. But still here. And I whispered aloud, "You have to stop watching. You have to start living." His message didn't scream. It didn't accuse. It just ended everything clean. It was a Thursday evening. The sun hadn't set yet. But the sky had already turned that flat, dusky gray, the kind of light that makes everything feel colder than it actually is. I told myself I was just going out for dinner, that I deserved to get out, that I wasn't thinking about Kai, but I knew exactly where I was driving. His street, again. Same spot down the block, same routine I had promised myself I'd stop. There was no movement at first, just the warm light inside his living room. Then I saw the shadow move past the curtain. I don't know why I stayed. I wasn't hoping for anything. I wasn't going to get out of the car. But I think some part of me wanted to be noticed, even if it was just by a glimpse, even if it ended badly. I left 20 minutes later, drove home in silence, the radio off, the world muffled behind glass. I didn't even take off my shoes when I stepped inside. I just dropped my bag by the door and sat on the couch. Then my phone buzzed. One new message, from Kai. My heart stopped. Not because it was from him, but because deep down I knew it wouldn't be what I wanted. I opened it. "Sage, I've noticed you around. Please stop following me. This isn't healthy. It's not going to change anything." That was it. 3 short sentences. No anger, no venom. Just release. I stared at the screen until the words burned into my vision. "Stop following me. This isn't healthy. It's not going to change anything." I read it again and again. My first instinct was denial. He was wrong. I wasn't following. I was just passing by. But I knew he was right. Every drive, every sidewalk stop, every glance from across the street. It wasn't about love. It was control. It was grief refusing to become silence. I sat there for a long time. Too long. The room got darker. I didn't move, didn't cry. I just shut down. And then I whispered to myself, "It's over." Not in the dramatic way people say it in movies. Not with a sob or a slammed door. Just that steady sinking kind of truth that presses into your bones. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. What would I have typed? "I'm sorry, too late." "I still love you," too selfish. "I'll stop," too obvious. So I left it unread. On purpose. Let it live there untouched like a gravestone. The next day his street was empty. So was the parking space. No lights, no movement. He was gone. Or maybe he just wasn't home. Either way, I didn't stop. I drove past. Didn't slow down, didn't glance. Just kept going. And it hurt. But not in the way I expected. It wasn't sharp, it was dull. A quiet ache in my chest, like my ribs had learned to breathe around the absence. At home, I started cleaning. Not out of productivity, out of necessity. I gathered everything that still had his name on it. The saved voicemails, the wedding folder, the playlist we made together. Deleted. All of it. It wasn't angry, it was ceremonial. Like closing windows before a storm. For the first time in weeks, I sat by the window without reaching for my phone. No scrolling, no checking, just sitting, just breathing. And in that moment, I understood what people mean when they say letting go isn't one big decision. It's 100 small ones. Tiny choices made every day to stop reaching towards someone who isn't reaching back. Later that night, I lit a candle. Not for him, for me. To mark the end. To give the goodbye its own kind of burial. I didn't text Kai again. Not that day, not the next, not ever. I didn't stalk his social media. Didn't ask Rhett for updates. Didn't wonder what Nova knew. Because none of it mattered anymore. He had drawn the line. And for once, I didn't cross it. I stepped back. Not because I stopped caring, but because I finally started caring about myself more. And maybe that was the only closure I was ever going to get. Not a grand apology, not a second chance, just one message. This isn't going to change anything, and the quiet that followed, which surprisingly finally felt like peace. I don't have the ring. I don't have him, but at least I finally have myself. Mornings are the hardest. That space between sleep and consciousness where your mind forgets what's gone just long enough to feel safe. And then it hits you, the weight, the memory, the echo of what used to be. But this morning, it was different. I woke up and for the first time in months, I didn't check my phone. I didn't wonder if he'd written. Didn't scroll to see if Nova had posted some picture with a familiar silhouette blurred in the background. I just lay there, still, present, here. The apartment is quiet but not empty. There's a difference. The kind of silence I used to fear has become a kind of calm. A space to breathe without apology. I made breakfast. Nothing fancy, just toast and black coffee. But it tasted like progress. I sat by the window, the same window I used to press my forehead against, while watching Kai's absence echo through the street below. This time, I just watched the sky. No narrative, no metaphor. Just clouds moving past without asking for permission. I think healing is like that. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock. It just begins in quiet moments you almost don't notice. I went for a walk that afternoon. Not toward his neighborhood. Just around the block. Hands in pockets. Head up. I passed a bookstore and went inside. Bought a journal. One with a navy blue cover and thick unlined pages. I didn't know what I was going to write in it. Only that it was time to hear my own voice again. Not filtered through guilt. Not buried under apologies. Just mine. Back home, I lit the same candle from the night I deleted everything. Watched it flicker while I sat on the floor and opened the journal. And I wrote, not to him, not about him, not even about the loss. I wrote about myself, about the girl I was before all of this, about the woman I was becoming, messy, resilient, still here. And somewhere in those first pages, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe understanding. That love isn't always clean. That sometimes the kindest thing someone can do for you is walk away because you wouldn't have done it yourself. Kai did that for me. He drew the line I couldn't. And now standing on this side of it, I see it clearly. I loved him, truly. But I didn't love myself enough to be honest with him. Not until it was too late. And maybe that's what this chapter was always going to be. Not a love story, not a tragedy, but a mirror. A reflection of what happens when we lose ourselves in the name of not losing someone else. I think about him sometimes. Not in the way I used to. Not like a wound. More like a scar, faded but still part of the map. And I hope he's okay. I really do. I hope Nova makes him laugh on rainy days. I hope he plays guitar again. I hope he sleeps through the night, but I don't hope for him to come back. That part of the story is over. I don't want a reunion. I want a rebirth. And that starts here, with me, on the floor of a quiet apartment, writing my way back into the world. I won't pretend I figured everything out. Some days still ache, some nights still rewind without permission. But I've stopped fighting the memories, and I've started listening to what they were trying to teach me all along. That silence isn't always punishment. Sometimes it's protection. That closure doesn't always come from a final conversation. Sometimes it comes from accepting you'll never get one. That being someone's second choice doesn't mean you're unworthy. It just means they couldn't see clearly, and now it's your turn to see yourself. Fully, bravely, unapologetically. I take the ring from the drawer where I left it weeks ago. Hold it one last time, not with longing but with gratitude. It taught me that promises made in fear don't hold. That love without clarity is just a beautiful delay. That walking away when done right can be an act of love too. I place the ring in a small box, slide it onto a high shelf, not to forget it, but to honor the story it held and the ending I chose not to rewrite. And as I sit back down, pen still warm in my hand, I whisper one last thing into the quiet that now feels like mine. I didn't get the ending I wanted, but maybe this is the one I needed. What would you have done in Sage's place? Have you ever walked away from someone you loved just to find yourself again? Or maybe you've been on the other side, waiting, wondering. Sometimes silence doesn't mean we don't care. It means we're lost too. If this story hits somewhere deep, tell me why in the comments. Vote tomorrow 1 if you believe Sage made the right call. Vote tomorrow 9 if you think she waited too long. And if you're still healing from your own goodbye, you're not alone. Don't forget to subscribe to EN True Tales so you never miss a moment of truth, heartbreak, and quiet strength. We're here every day with stories that feel like they could have been yours.